What kind of childhood creates a man who changes the fate of nations? Born into poverty and marred by violence, Joseph Stalin's early life was a crucible of hardship. But how did a cobbler's son from Georgia rise to command the might of the Soviet Union? Stay tuned to uncover the untold story of ambition, revolution, and power that shaped the 20th century. Joseph Stalin, one of the most influential figures of the 20th century, was born Yev Vasovich Jash on the 18th of December 1878 in the eastern Georgian town of Gori. According to the Julian calendar, still in use in the Russian Empire at the time, his birth date was the 6th of December. Stalin was a pen name he adopted in his mid-30s. His father, Basaran Jash, was a cobbler who initially had a thriving business. However, Basaran failed to adapt to changing times, and his shoes eventually became unfashionable, plunging the family into poverty. Stalin's mother, Yarina Galad, was a devout Orthodox Christian who married Basaran at the tender age of 16. She bore 3 sons, but tragically, the 2 oldest died in infancy. This heartbreaking loss led Yarina to place all her hopes for the future in her only surviving son, Yev. Yev's parents had a tumultuous relationship, often marred by violent disputes. When Yev was just 10, Yarina left Basaran, who had become an abusive alcoholic. Seeking refuge, Yarina turned to a family friend named Yakov Ignatash, who had been the godfather to her deceased sons. This provided both mother and son a semblance of security for a time. To make ends meet, Ketavan took on housework in the local area, including for a priest named Christopher Charkviani. In 1888, Christopher helped secure a place for Iosif in the Gori church school. Iosif proved to be an excellent student, quickly rising to the top of his class. Despite this turn of fortune, Iosif narrowly survived a smallpox epidemic, which left his face pockmarked. A more drastic incident occurred when he was 12. His left arm was mangled in the wheel of a horse-drawn cart, leaving him hospitalized for months and permanently impairing his arm. After recovering, Iosif continued to excel academically and was recommended by his teacher to join the religious seminary at Tbilisi. He was admitted in 1894, but it soon became clear that his destiny lay elsewhere. Young Iosif declared that he did not believe in God, which was an important issue for any budding priest. Instead, she began to read forbidden literature, including Nikolai Chernyshevsky's famous novel, What Should Be Done, and included the works of Karl Marx, whom he admired very much. Iosif soon joined secret socialist workers' meetings in Georgia, where resentment and anger against the oppressive government of the Russian Tsar grew. By the end of the 19th century, Russia had been ruled by czars for more than 3.5 centuries, dating back to the time of Ivan the Terrible. The Tsar was the absolute ruler, which meant that there was no tradition of parliament or public representation in Russia. The country was ruled by the Tsar, with the support of powerful nobles and the Orthodox Church. Despite Russia's status as a great power, it was an economically backward empire dependent primarily on agriculture. Peasant slavery was abolished in 1861, and the assassination of Tsar Alexander II in 1881 halted his sweeping reforms. His successor, Alexander III, further strengthened the autocracy, and when Nicholas II took the throne in 1894, new movements began to destabilize the country. Cities such as Moscow and St. Petersburg were industrializing, leading to the penetration of socialist and communist ideas, including native political movements such as anarchism. Many within these groups and wider society were seeking political representation and a comprehensive overhaul to modernize Russian society and free it from its medieval traditions.
Despite its great power status, domestically, Russia was very backward. The empire's economy was based almost entirely on agriculture, and serfdom had only been abolished in 1861. Tsar Alexander II had attempted wide-ranging reforms prior to his assassination in 1881, but his successor, Alexander III, was a reactionary who doubled down on autocracy. By the time Nicholas II came to the throne in 1894, major new movements were destabilizing the country. Cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg were industrializing, leading to an influx of radical socialist and communist thought combined with new indigenous political movements like the anarchists. Many people within these groups and within wider society wanted political representation and a drastic overhaul of Russian society to pull it firmly into the modern age and out of the medieval habits and traditions that it was still mired in. Stalin was a complex figure, driven by a desire to accumulate power, but also by a genuine belief in communist principles. He wrote and published many books and papers on communist theory, demonstrating a considerable knowledge of Marxist theory and a capacity to reflect on the Soviet Union's level of development towards communism. Although not an intellectual in the same vein as Trotsky, Stalin was still an intelligent figure, albeit one seemingly devoid of any ethical restraint or moral compass. Stalin's personal library, which contained around 20,000 books, provides a good sense of his intellectual and personal world. Many of these books contain marginal annotations by Stalin, indicating his active engagement with the material. His tastes were wide-ranging, including the classics of Russian literature by Alexander Pushkin and Leo Tolstoy, as well as works by Shakespeare, Victor Hugo, and Daniel Defoe. Stalin's marginal annotations were often basic, writing his agreements with certain points made, or, at other times, writing things like rubbish or gibberish when he disagreed with a point being made. The foremost question confronting the Soviet Union as Stalin consolidated his position in the mid-1920s was the country's future economic policy. The new economic policy that Lenin had pursued in his last years had only ever been a temporary expedient, one which most of those who oversaw it did not like, and which had capitalist elements. Now, with peace and stability restored, there was room to begin implementing ambitious policies to transform Russia's economy towards a communist one. To this end, in 1928, Stalin began the first five-year plan. The concept of a five-year plan had originated with Trotsky, who first proposed it in 1925. Stalin accepted the validity of the approach and pursued it. The goal of the first five-year plan, which would operate down to 1932, was to rapidly expand the industrial economy of the Soviet Union. At the time of the revolution in 1917, Russia had a number of cities with considerable industrial capacity, but the USSR was still a resoundingly agricultural and rural society. Heavy industry of any kind hardly existed east of the River Volga. The first five-year plan sought to expand things like steel and coal production at a very quick rate. This would be achieved by introducing efficiencies into the agriculture sector by developing large state-run collective farms that would require less labor to produce larger amount of food. Joseph Stalin's life and legacy are marked by a complex interplay of personal ambition, ideological fervor, and historical context. From his humble beginnings in Georgia to his rise as a revolutionary and eventual leader of the Soviet Union, Stalin's journey is a study in power, intellect, and the application of communist principles in a country with a long history of autocracy and violence. His policies, particularly the first five-year plan, had a profound impact on the Soviet Union's economic and social landscape, setting the stage for the country's future development.